Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, the context is everything Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading a textbook, cover to cover. Today, we are on Chapter 29, Section 4. Upheavals in China. Yesterday, we talked about something else, which you can watch here. Today, let us begin. I will finish this textbook hopefully by the end of the summer. A hopeful guarantee. Upheavals in China, please and thank you, you 57 lovely people, listeners. And all of other listeners that don't subscribe, thank you for listening anyway. But I would appreciate your subscription as well. Upheavals in China, I will do other things and I will talk. Now, upheavals in China. Sun Yat-sen, father of Chinese Revolution, painted a grim picture of China after the overthrow of the Qing dynasty. "In comparison with other nations," he wrote, "we have the greatest population and the oldest culture of 4,000 years' duration." In spite of this, he noted, China was the poorest and weakest state in the world. Other countries were carving a knife and serving the carving knife and the serving dish, and China was the fish and the meat. As the new Chinese Republic took shape, nationalists like Sun Yat-sen set the goal of catching up and surpassing the powers east and west. But the goal would remain distant dream as China suffered the turmoil of civil war and foreign invasion. The Chinese Republic. New heading. Sunglasses indicate new heading. Thank you. The Chinese Republic. In China, as you will recall, the Qing dynasty collapsed in 1911. Sun Yat-sen hoped to rebuild China in 3 principles of the people, but he made little progress. China quickly fell into chaos. Internal problems. In 1912, Sun Yat-sen stepped down as president in favor of a powerful general, Yuan Shikai. Sun hoped that Yuan would restore order and create strong central government. Instead, the ambitious general tried to set up a new dynasty, with himself as the emperor. The military, however, did not support him, and opposition divided the nation. When Yuan died in 1916, China plunged into still greater disorder. In the provinces, local warlords seized power. As rival armies battled for control, the economy collapsed and millions of peasants suffered terrible hardships. Warlords forced them to pay taxes and to support their armies. The constant fighting ravaged the land. Famine and attacks by bandits added to their misery. Foreign imperialism. During this period of upheaval, foreign powers increased their influence over Chinese affairs. Foreign merchants, missionaries, and soldiers dominated the ports of China and had opened them to trade. Foreign merchants, missionaries, and soldiers dominated the ports of China. The ports China had opened for trade. They also exerted influence inland. In 1915, Japan had begun to put new pressure on its once powerful neighbor. While the attentions of the Western powers were focused on World War I, Japan presented Yuan Shikai with 21 demands, which sought to make China a Japanese protectorate. Too weak to resist, Yuan gave in to some of the demands. Then, in 1919, the Paris Peace Conference, the victorious Allies gave Japan control over former German possessions in China. That news infuriated Chinese nationalists, who blamed their leaders for selling out China to the Treaty of Versailles. May 4th movement. On May 4th, 1919, student protests erupted in Beijing and later spread to the cities across China. A startling event in those days. China's territory may be conquered, they declared, but it cannot be given away. The Chinese people may be massacred, but they will not surrender. Students organized boycotts of Japanese goods. Student protests set off a cultural and intellectual ferment. Student protests set off cultural and intellectual ferment, known as May 4th movement. As with earlier reform movements, its goal was to strengthen China. Western educated leaders blamed the imperialists' successes on China's own weaknesses. As in Meiji, Japan, China's reformers wanted to learn from the West and use that knowledge to end foreign domination. Most reformers rejected Confucian traditions, and many turned to Western science and ideas such as democracy and nationalism to solve China's problems. Women played a key role in the May 4th movement, just as they had in earlier uprisings. They joined marches and campaigned to end a number of traditional practices such as arranged marriages, foot binding, and the seclusion of women within the home. Their work helped open doors for women in education and in the economy. Appeal to Marxism. The appeal of Marxism. Some Chinese turn to revolutionary ideas of Marx and Lenin. The Russian Revolution seemed to offer a model of how strong, well-organized party could transform a nation, and Soviet Russia was more willing to train Chinese students and military officers to become the vanguard or elite leaders of a communist revolution. By the 1920s, a small group of Chinese communists had formed their own political party. Leaders for a new China. New heading. In 1921, Sun Yat-sen and his Guomindang, Goumindang, or Nationalists Party. Sun Yat-sen and his Guomindang, or Nationalist Party, established a government in the south of China. I don't know why there's a comma there. Either way. Sun planned to raise an army, defeat the warlords, and spread his government's rule over all of China. When Western powers ignored pleas for help in building a democratic China, Sun declared that the one real and genuine friend of the Chinese Revolution is Soviet Russia. Russian experts helped the nationalists plan to carry out their campaign against warlords. That's kind of similar. They like each other nowadays as well, the Russians and the Chinese. Jiang Jieshi. After Sun's death in 1925, an energetic young army officer, Jiang Jieshi, took over the Guomindang. He had received military training in Japan. While he was determined to smash the power of warlords and reunite China, Jiang had little interest in either democracy or communism. In 1926, Jiang Jieshi began to march into northern China, crushing local warlords as he advanced capturing Beijing. In mid-campaign, he stopped to strike the Chinese Communist Party, which he saw as a threat to his power. While Jiang had the support of landlords and business leaders, the communists were winning converts among the small proletariat in cities like Shanghai. Early in 1927, on the orders of Jiang, Guomindang troops slaughtered Communist Party members and the workers who supported them. In Shanghai and elsewhere, thousands of people were killed. Anger over the massacre would fuel a bitter civil war that lasted for 22 years. Mao Zedong. Among the communists who escaped Jiang's attacks was a young revolutionary Chinese communist. Unlike earlier Chinese communists, was a young revolutionary of peasant origins, Mao Zedong. Unlike earlier Chinese communists, Mao believed that the communists should seek support not among the small urban working class, but among the large peasant masses. Although the communists were persuaded at every turn by Kuomintang forces, Mao was optimistic that eventual success. A single spark can start a prairie fire, he once observed. For some time, Mao and the communists organized peasants in southern China. They redistributed land to peasants and offered them schooling and health care. The Long March. Jiang Jieshi, however, was determined to destroy the Red Bandits, as he called the communists. He led Kuomintang, which is the Nationalist Party, in a series of extermination campaigns against them. In 1934, in an epic retreat known as the Long March, Mao and about 100,000 of his followers fled the Kuomintang. During the next year, they trekked more than 6,000 miles, facing daily attacks as they crossed rugged mountains, deep gorges, and mighty rivers. Only about 20,000 people survived the ordeal, 20,000 of 100,000. For decades, the Long March stood as a symbol of communist heroism to Chinese who opposed the Kuomintang, the Nationalist Party. The march also inspired new recruits to follow Mao. During the Long March, the communists enforced strict discipline. Soldiers had to follow 3 main rules. Obey orders, do not take a single needle or piece of thread from the people, and turn in everything you capture. Further, they were to treat peasants politely, pay for goods they wanted, and avoid damaging crops. Such behavior made Mao's forces welcome among peasants, many of whom had suffered greatly at the hand of Kuomintang. At the end of the Long March, the communists set up a new base in a remote region of northern China. There, Mao built his forces and plotted a new strategy for fighting the Kuomintang, the Nationalist Party. He claimed the Great Retreat as a victory. As he observed, "The Long March is also a seedling machine. It has sown many seeds in 11 provinces, which will sprout, grow leaves, blossom into flowers, bear fruit, and yield a crop." Mao Zedong on the tactics of fighting Japanese imperialism. Japanese invasion. New heading. While Jiang was pursuing the communists across China, the country faced another danger. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria in northeastern China, adding it to its growing Japanese empire. As Japanese aggression increased, some of Jiang's own generals began to doubt him. Why, they demanded, did he waste valuable resources fighting other Chinese instead of mobilizing against the foreign invaders? In the end, Jiang was forced to form a united front with the communists against Japan. In 1937, the Japanese struck again. As airplanes bombed Chinese cities, highly disciplined and well-equipped Japanese troops overran eastern China, including Beijing and Guangzhou. Jiang Jieshi retreated to the interior and set up his capital at Chongqing. After a lengthy siege, Japanese troops marched into the city of Nanjing on December 13th. Nanjing was an important cultural center and had been the nationalist capital before Chongqing. After the city's surrender, the Japanese killed hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilizations and brutalized still more. The cruelty and destruction became known around the world as the Rape of Nanjing. Looking ahead. From 1937 to 1945, the Kuomintang, the Communists, and the Japanese were locked in three-sided struggle. The bombing of Pearl Harbor in 1941 brought the United States not only into the war against Japan, but also into an alliance with the Chinese as well. After Japan's defeat, the United States, which supported Jiang, tried to prevent renewed civil war in China, but with no success. Within a few years, the Communists would triumph, and Mao would move to impose revolutionary change on China. Thank you for listening. All 57 of you, and anyone else who's not a subscriber but made it this far. Thank you. Please subscribe. Thank you. God bless. Goodbye.